Hi, here we go. So, why am I here? I'm here really in response to a mum and a few parents that I've heard talk about specific ways of communicating with their children who've got difficulties, which could be all sorts of things. I have no qualifications whatsoever. I'm not an expert unless you put me in the bracket of parent by experience. Expert by experience, I think often they call them. I have 3 children. They are now 20, 18 and 16, and all of them have had in one way or another difficulties with communication. 2 of them are on the autistic spectrum. One of them had considerable speech delay when he was little as a result of a syndrome called Noonan syndrome. And so I talk to a lot of parents, and I've tried all sorts of different ways to help them communicate, help me communicate with them. And so I responded to this lovely mum who was wanting to learn a little bit more about PECS, P-E-C-S, which is Picture Enhanced Communication System. It's a formal method, an official method of communicating by pictures. We are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic of 2020, if this video makes it into the future. And so all of the training things feel a little bit out of reach. And I think, I remember back to when my kids were little and I was desperate to find solutions and ways of working. And I would have felt really scared of not being able to access all of that. So I said I'd do a little bit of talking, and I would have loved to put something together and make it look professional. And then I thought, actually, there's a lot of that out there. YouTube is filled with instruction videos on how to use PECS, and maybe what I can offer is something a little bit different. So here we go. I'm gonna talk, and if I'll try and put some bits so that you've got in writing on the screen what you need for links, and I will try. I think if you use YouTube, there is a setting. If you go to the 3 little dots at the top of the screen, you'll be able to put captions on. I know most of the time if I'm watching a YouTube video, I need to watch it big captions because I cannot, my kids won't cope with me listening to something out loud. So here we go. The first thing that I would say is that there is no one system that is going to fix everything. There is no one system that is going to work with every child, and there is no one system that worked with your child last week that will work next week. I think when you have a child with communication difficulties, as a parent, you have to learn to be really nimble, really flexible, and you learn to become the most phenomenal listener. By listener, I'm not talking about words. A lot of our kids, when they're little, either are non-verbal, so they can't talk. Some of them really don't talk at all, don't make any noise. Lots of them will make an awful lot of noise. My 2 eldest in particular were extraordinarily articulate. They had huge vocabulary. They used words a lot. Their words didn't actually communicate what they wanted to tell me most of the time. And it took me a very, very long time to figure that out. It took me a long time to understand that for these really smart, bright, verbal children, words and speech was often the worst way of communicating for them and with them. I suppose one of the first things that I would say is it's really worth thinking about sign language. Makaton, really, really simple. The one I actually used sign language with my eldest, so 20 years ago, before it was really commonplace here, and I used American Sign Language because that was the book I could find. And it wasn't about teaching my deaf child to be part of a community. It was about me trying to communicate with my son. American Sign Language has a really convenient aspect when you're working with a little one because it mostly uses one hand. So I could, hold something or a baby or a pushchair or whatever in one hand and do a sign with the other. I found that really useful. I don't remember much of it now. I remember milk and I remember more, I think. Yes, please and thank you. But it was astonishingly successful with my eldest. He wouldn't talk, he didn't like communicating, But when we hit on sign language, I started with him when he was 7 months old. It took him till he was about 13, 14 months to start communicating with me. And then it was like this gush of communication happened. Those grandparents who picked up on it also found that they were able to communicate with him really, really effectively. And I am absolutely convinced that using sign with him really helped him then start talking. We got to the point where you could see he was frustrated and wanted to say more, and I simply didn't have enough vocabulary. So we always used to speak when we signed, and I'd just add in, and that got him started with speaking. So sign language is really worth looking at. My daughter refused sign language. She refused communication for a really, really long time. If I tried to sign, she would just go like this. No, don't want to hear it. Don't want to see it. Had nothing to do with it. And to be honest with her, I don't think I really found a particular way. However, I had already by that point started using pictures. I didn't know anything about PECS. I knew that Zach, who hadn't been diagnosed with autism at the time, but he then was, I knew that words just, we'd get into arguments really, really quickly, and he'd get really upset. But if I could draw little stick figures, so for example, if I wanted to explain to this little 2, 3, 4-year-old that we were going to have breakfast and then we were going to the shops, or then we were going to school, I would just draw really, really simple pictures. So I might draw a glass of milk and a piece of toast, and then I would draw the car, and then I would draw a picture of something and say it was school. And so we started using pictures like that, and I found that was quite useful without knowing any more than that. I learned about PECS when the youngest came along, and he had difficulties with speech very clearly, and we tried signing. He couldn't do it. He was a little bit intrigued by it, kind of liked the look of it, but he couldn't get his hands to do the thing, so that wasn't working. And we were really fortunate. We were in the UK at that point, and we were under a system called Portage, which is kind of like a preschool educational system for children with additional needs. And that's when I learned about pictures. I didn't hear the word PECS, but that's essentially what she was doing. We tried pictures with him, and that was tricky. He just didn't quite get it. So we went back a step and we took photographs. We took photographs of a glass of orange juice, a glass of milk, because those were the only two things he would drink. We took pictures of his favourite teddy. We took pictures of home, of the pets, of the members of the family. Now, I bought a laminator. It was the most exciting thing in the whole wide world. A laminator isn't necessary, and one of the things that you could certainly look at in this day and age, if you have an iPad or a tablet or a phone, I am absolutely sure there are apps on there with pictures, or just load up your camera gallery and use that. But what we did was we took photos, we printed them out and cut little cards. And we started off really slowly. So if it was time for him to have a drink, do bear in mind that this particular child was tube fed until last year, so for 15 years. So he had very, very limited foods and drinks that he would cope with. But if it was time to have something to drink, I would bring out my two pictures, so the milk and the orange juice. And I would say to him, Tom, do you want milk or do you want orange juice? And slowly he would point to it. Because they were photographs, he made the link to the real thing much more easily. So it really started that basic, do you want this or that? And then he would point. And as time went on, we put all of these little cards on a keyring. But what you do, I think that's the bit where it gets interesting. You can do the official PECS system where you've got, all you need really is a ring binder, and you have pieces of card with strips of Velcro and attach little bits of Velcro to your pictures, and they live there. I tried that. I found it really unwieldy. It just didn't work terribly well. Having those same cards, we didn't have very many to start with. We made them fairly small and we put them on a ring. You could, baby toys which have rattles and things. You could use one of those rings. You could use a piece of string. It doesn't actually really matter. Sometimes I found that having the cards somewhere, I did at one point, I had a piece of string across, I think it was across the hearth, I can't quite remember, and I had clothes pegs, and I just pegged the picture cards onto those. And he would then come and say to me, well, I want this teddy. So with no words, I would have this little tiny tot run up to me with a picture. And what he was saying is, I want this. So it might be, I want my teddy. It might be, I want to go to the park. It might be, I want orange juice. But immediately you start getting a communication going. It's really, really important in all of this to carry on talking. So if he came to me with the card with orange juice, I'd say, well, Tom, do you want some orange juice? Now, you can take it even further. You can have a card that says yes and a card that says no. And again, you can find pictures, or you can use the words, because a word is a picture as well. With Tom, I was quite quickly able to get him to verbalize a yes or a no. It could actually just be a nod or a shake of the head. But all the time I would use speech in communicating and just repeating all the time. It was amazing the difference that those cards made. First of all, he could communicate with him, and it doesn't happen with everybody. With him, it kicked his speech in very quickly. For children who can't talk for all sorts of reasons, that picture system, and then you find the ring binder, I think, can probably become quite useful, is that they can then you build up very, very, very slowly the ability to make sentences. So I want to go to the park, for example. There's loads and loads and loads of online support to build that up. But remember, the bottom line is you're trying to communicate with your child. Doesn't really matter how rough and ready it is. It doesn't matter exactly how you do it. I built that system into our house so that I had little PEX boards of what to do in the toilet. You know, you pull your trousers down, pull your pants down, sit on the loo, do your business, wipe your bum, wash your hands. And they were there for ages. At one point, one of them struggled with washing properly. So I got it was a whiteboard marker, and I wrote and drew pictures for every step of washing onto the shower screen. I didn't tell them I was doing it because they were much bigger then, and that would have been bad. I couldn't do directly. But by writing a little bit, you know, on the bathroom mirror, I'd put a toothbrush and toothpaste and a set of things. The other thing that I use pictures for really successfully was dealing with meltdowns and upsets. I struggle with word meltdown now. I used to use it a lot, and actually still in my head when I say meltdown, I feel a little bit cross with the person who's having a meltdown, because it's really horrible behavior. Actually, it's a panic attack. It's an expression of distress. And when I look back, I now think, you know, those kids were not okay. They were out of control. But what we did quite a lot was when things had calmed down and I was trying to figure out what on earth happened. I need to understand here, because if I don't know why you got this upset, I can't stop it from happening again. We used comic strips. And again, I didn't know they were called comic strips. I learned a lot afterwards, but I found quite instinctively that using pictures was a key way to communicate in a way that was non-threatening. So I would just draw a little comic strip, and I might say, you know, well, you know, Mummy and, let's call them Barbara. I don't know why Barbara. Mummy and Barbara were making pizza earlier. And so I draw a stick figure for Mummy and a stick figure for Barbara. I used to have to say, that's Mummy, that's Barbara, because I am not good at drawing. And then I draw a pizza. And then I might leave a square blank. If there was something I don't know what happened, so I might draw a blank square, say I don't know what happened, and then I draw the next square, and in the next square Barbara might be crying, or the pizza might be on the floor because maybe Barbara had thrown the pizza on the floor. And we slowly could build up what was the thing that was missing. And sometimes they were able to tell me because they were verbal at that point. Sometimes they might point to mummy and say, oh, did I say something? So it may have been that I said something. It may have been that I talk, we all talk with our hands, with our bodies, our faces, and those are not as easy to understand for everybody as we might think. I grew up instinctively understanding people's faces and reading their emotions. I have children who don't always understand what my face does, and their faces don't always express what they're feeling. So using a picture to name emotions was really helpful. It's all been really, really haphazard. It's all been make it up as I go along. I found as they grew older, the pictures were replaced with words. So I often had a laptop just ready with a Word document, usually with really, really big fonts. And if one of them got upset, I would zoom over to my laptop and I would say, what's the matter? I'd write it. I didn't say anything. And what transpired then was actually in those states, they found my normal verbal communication just too much to process. By writing exactly what I had spoken 5 minutes beforehand, they would answer me as if everything was completely fine. And I would have a conversation where the way that I communicated was by typing. So all they had to deal with was the text on the screen. I did it in written form as well. That was harder because I type quicker, and I think there's something easier to read for them at that point. But I think that could be quite well adapted to pictures as well. Sometimes I think it's really important as parents to realise that our physical being is completely overwhelming to somebody who is autistic, for example. I'd say that's the experience that I have. So it's useful to find a way to say what you want to say and say what you need to say without overwhelming them. I think the way I think about it is, if somebody is here in my face screaming at me, I can't take in what they're saying. And I think that for a lot of children who are on the autistic spectrum, normal speech, the way that I'm talking to you right now, feels like someone in your face screaming, and you just can't take it in. It's worth bearing in mind, one of the things I discovered fairly recently is that one of my children has quite severe face blindness, it turns out. And so if my hair was different, or if I happened to not be wearing my glasses, he didn't recognize me. So immediately he was terrified because he didn't know who was talking to him. So I think it's really worth just thinking about your little one, or your less than little one, and thinking what might they be experiencing? And if it's a lot of information, what can I take away? So can I make my body language much quieter? Can I stop using my hands for a little bit? Or actually, is it my words that need to be quiet? And do I need to give a hug or just sit with? Pictures are really, really, really useful, but they are not the solution. And I'd say, have a go, try what works. You might find that the first thing that you need to do is pour out a glass of milk and pour out a glass of orange juice and say, hello, Johnny, which one do you want? Do you want milk or do you want orange juice? And then once they're able to make that choice and you've got that immediately is some communication. Then you could have those glasses in the fridge, so you could open the fridge and they can point to which one they want. Then you can bring the pictures are really useful because they're portable and they can be moved around all over the place. But be creative. You don't need to follow a specific system. There are loads and loads of resources online that you can print out, or as I say, photographs are really helpful at the beginning. I'm going to put a link, hopefully about this point in the video, of a website that I used that seems to be still up and running. I had a little look earlier, that I used loads because there was a lot of free resources on there. Have fun, good luck, and let me know how you get on. I'd be really interested to see, and I hope this was helpful to some extent. Okay, thank you. Bye.